Viola Bennet. Chapter 22. The Way Home. Bright sunlight spilled across the rooftops of St. Gallen. Viola has just completed her demanding MBA degree at the Business School of St. Gallen University and concluded the collaboration with the renowned jewelry house. Armed with experience and inspiration, she would return to Bremen to launch her own brand, Viola Bennet, anchored in the message from Earth to Future. It was a collection shaped by her belief that art must honor the earth it draws from. Her designs wove together memories from Africa, the echo of Mars, and a journey from passion to steady love, where earthly struggles transformed into cosmic beauty, the genuine beauty of rationality. She would soon say farewell to St. Gallen, the city that had shaped her, challenged her, and quietly held her through every storm. Before leaving for Bremen, she arranged one last meeting with Sean, not on the tennis court this time, but in the small cafe tucked behind the cathedral square, where the morning light spilled through leaded glass like melted honey. It was not a lesson anymore, only a farewell. Sean sat by the window, composed as ever, dark sweater, sleeves rolled, espresso untouched. But when Viola entered, his posture shifted ever so slightly, like someone caught between duty and a lingering memory. "You found the place," he said, voice low but warm. His smile was gentle, not quite steady. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," she replied, setting her teacup down with quiet resolve. "I'm leaving for Bremen. For good this time." Sean nodded slowly, stirring his coffee though he didn't drink it. "A change of court then," he murmured. "And maybe a quieter kind of match." Viola smiled faintly. "Yes, the kind of match I've always dreamed of." He looked at her, truly looked, as though memorizing the steadiness in her eyes. "You sound different," he said after a moment. "Less restless." "I am," she said. "I think I was chasing intensity," Viola said, tracing the edge of her cup. "And your advice was right. Passion fades. What lasts is understanding. I have said goodbye to the past." Sean's thumb froze mid-stir, his eyes betraying recognition. "And now?" "Now it's the quiet kind," she said simply. "The kind that stays even when everything else changes. It's not a fire, it's gravity. I used to think love needed sparks. Now I think it needs direction also." Sean exhaled, leaning back. He still remembered that young man with clear eyes and reliable manner. It should be him, he thought. His jaw flexed slightly, as if steadying himself. "You found what I never could," he said at last. "You learned to stay, not out of duty, but by choice." She looked at him then, eyes full of the empathy that once almost drew them both in. "Sean, you stayed following your heart and duty. That was love too, in its own way. You bore your cross with dignity. You were honest about it, even when it hurts. That loyalty helped me see what kind of love I wanted, and what kind I could never ask for." He flinched, just barely, the truth landing like a quiet ache. Then he gave a faint half-smile. "You make it sound noble," he said, his tone caught between gratitude and regret. "But it wasn't. It was cowardice. I couldn't risk breaking what was already fragile." "No, Sean," she said softly. "It was strength. You chose not to destroy a world that depended on you. That's not cowardice. That's brave." He laughed once, a sound dry and fragile as old paper. "You still have that empathy in your voice," he said. "That's what made everything harder, you know. You saw too much and your heart is sweet." "And you let me," she replied gently. For a while, neither spoke. The cafe hummed with distant conversation, the clink of cups, the low rustle of pages turning. Sean finally reached for his cup, took a sip, then set it down carefully. His hand lingered on the table, fingers tracing a faint circle, not unlike the way his hand once brushed against the tennis net between them. "I'll miss our talks," he said. "You made me feel human again." Viola met his gaze, steady and kind. "And you made me see that love isn't about escaping, it's about engaging. Even when it's imperfect." Something flickered in his eyes, admiration, loss, something deeper he could never name aloud. He stood as she rose, straightening his sweater with unnecessary precision. "I hope Bremen gives you peace," he said. Then, after a pause, his voice dropped into something almost tender, "and someone who never makes you doubt where home is." Viola smiled, calm and luminous. "I already found that. In myself first." Sean's lips parted, then closed again. He wanted to say more, perhaps everything he hadn't said in all those restrained, electric silences, but all that came out was a fragile, final whisper. "Go with certainty, Viola." She reached out, lightly touching his arm, just once, just enough. "Goodbye, Sean," she said, her voice steady, her eyes soft with gratitude. "And thank you for seeing me before I saw myself." He watched her go, the soft click of the door, the sunlight catching her hair as she disappeared into the square. For a long moment, Sean stood there, hands in his pockets, the echo of her words folding into the quiet. Then he sat back down, finished the last cold sip of his espresso, and whispered to no one in particular. She finally won her long match game. At last, the journey home had begun. The plane lifted from the runway just after dawn, cutting through a sky streaked with silver clouds. Viola watched the city shrink beneath her, the spires, the rolling green hills, and the university where she had spent countless days and nights shaping both her mind and her future. Somewhere below lay all the versions of herself she was leaving behind. In her suitcase were only a few dresses, her sketchbooks, and a small box of 2 pearl necklaces which were gifted by Elias. When the plane descended through a veil of soft rain over Bremen, she felt the weight in her chest loosen, not an ache, but a deep, grounded peace. The city she grew up in, the place where her story had first begun, was waiting. As she stepped into the arrivals hall, the crowd blurred into motion. And then she saw him with shock. Elias. He was standing just a few steps ahead, more handsome than she remembered, wearing his navy jacket and that familiar half-smile that always reached his eyes. The moment their gazes met, the noise of the terminal seemed to vanish. Viola dropped her carry-on. Elias moved first, striding toward her, and she ran the last few steps. They collided in a quiet, desperate embrace, one that felt both like coming home and being found again after years of wandering. His arms wrapped around her as if anchoring her to the earth, his face pressed into her hair. Neither spoke. The rain outside tapped gently against the glass, and the whole world seemed to exhale around them. When they finally pulled apart, her voice was soft, a little unsteady. "Why are you here, Elias?" "Welcome home, V." She smiled through tears. "It feels like I never really left." Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and salt from the river. Elias lifted her single carry-on into the car, a testament to how lightly she'd traveled for the journey home, and they drove out of the airport together. "Do you see that?" he said, nodding toward a gleaming building just beyond the curve of the road. Outside under the overcast sky, stood a towering model rocket and a life-size Mars rover. A sign on the building read, "Next Generation Mars Rover." Viola's eyes followed the structure, her expression with pleasant surprise. "You're really doing it. All the things you're passionate about are continuing in Bremen?" He chuckled, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "Yes, to be continued, in a better way." He held Viola's hand warmly and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. They drove in companionable silence through the familiar tree-lined roads, past the old school where they once danced barefoot after the dancing course, their first slow dance, as Elias had called it. Time had shifted everything, yet here it was again, intact. His house was only a few minutes from her parents' home. Inside, it's almost the same as they met when they were teenagers. I wasn't sure if you'd want to stay here, Elias said quietly, helping her with the suitcase. You can, of course, go home for a few nights. Your grandparents will be thrilled. But I'd like you to think of this as home too. I set up everything in a very short time. You know it's very hectic, not sufficient yet. I will build you a studio maybe on the 3rd floor, where you can design, or just sit by the window and dream. I want to make something permanent, for us. And let you feel at home. She froze, her throat tightening. 4 years, Javier had asked her to move in, to share his world, but there had always been a wall, invisible yet solid, between her and that promise. Now, as she looked into Elias's eyes, the eyes that held quiet certainty and desired love, that wall melted away. The love beneath the ice was finally rebreathed. Tears welled up before she could stop them. Elias, you've already made it, here, she whispered, her hand covered her heart. He stepped closer, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb, and held her hands. Then stay, he said sincerely. Not because you have to, but because you are willing to. And I desperately want you here. Viola nodded, smiling through her tears. Yes. I will stay, with you. They embraced a long warm collision of two hearts that had spent too long apart. Outside, the rain eased, and a thin band of sunlight cut through the clouds, gilding the rooftops of Bremen. In that light, she could almost see the outlines of their shared past, 2 children playing music in the afternoon sunshine, 2 teenagers dancing under the starlit sky, and now, 2 grown hearts finally landing where they belonged. Wherever Elias was, she thought, there was home. By late afternoon, sunlight filtered gently, brushing the streets of Bremen with a soft, golden light. Elias suggested a short walk before dinner. Just a small detour, he said with that familiar boyish smile, and Viola needed no persuasion. They parked near the rhododendron park, the same place where, years ago, 2 teenagers had spent an entire Saturday running barefoot on the lawns and sharing a melody that would follow them through every chapter of their lives. It was also there, years ago, that they had almost missed each other, a moment that might have changed everything. Now as they entered the park again, the air was cool and fragrant. Summer had touched the leaves, tipping them in green and blooming, while the rhododendrons stood like gentle sentinels, their blossoms gone, their scent faint but lingering in the breeze. For a while, they simply walked, not talking much, only listening. The sound of the wind in the trees, the crunch of gravel beneath their shoes, the quiet, rhythmic pulse of being side by side again. I used to think this park was enormous, Viola said at last, smiling softly. When we were kids, it felt like another world. It still is, Elias replied. Only now can we finally stay in it a little longer. I can't believe it's real, being here with you, Viola said. I've imagined this moment so many times, but I'm terrified of losing it again. You won't, Elias said gently. I'm here. Always. Remember that night during Lisa's birthday party, right here in the park? You turned me down. Yes, Viola smiled faintly. That was a terrible idea of mine. I tried everything to forget you, Elias confessed, his voice low and warm. I tried not to love you, I tried to care for other people to distract my attention. But it never worked. There's always been a connection between us deep in my heart, something I couldn't erase. Viola's emotions surged. If only I had truly known that, Viola whispered. If I'd gotten any sign of your lasting love, I would have fought for it without hesitation. She stopped walking and looked at Elias, tears welling in her eyes. From now on, don't hide anymore, Elias. Please. I need to hear it from you. I will, Elias managed to say, his throat tightening. Then, with all the emotion he'd kept hidden for years, he pulled Viola close and held her. They stopped by the small wooden bridge over the pond, the one where they'd once fed ducks and argued about which constellation was best. Trees shaded them, and sunlight spilled through the leaves, weaving their shadows together. Do you remember the song I played that afternoon years ago when you came to my house? How could I forget? Viola answered, leaning next to him. It was so beautiful, so touching. I was deep in the melody, but I didn't even dare ask for whom you wrote it. I was so scared of that answer. It was for you, Elias said softly, and I still play it again and again whenever I think of you. Viola's breath caught. She looked at him, the man who still carried the same tenderness she remembered. Then she kissed him, without hesitation, without fear. It was the first time she'd ever wanted something so desperately, so completely. Elias responded with all the emotion he'd kept hidden for years. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if confirming that what he felt was, at last, real. I spent years chasing things millions of miles away, he murmured after the kiss. And now, standing here with you, I realize this is the only place I ever wanted to arrive. You've always belonged here, Elias, Viola whispered. You just had to drift far enough to find your way home. The words lingered between them, as gentle as the dusk gathering in the trees. He pulled her into his arms again. The embrace was deep and firmly, not a question, not a claim, but an answer long in the making. She felt the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear, the warmth of his breath in her hair, and a peace she hadn't known she was missing. By the time they returned from the park, evening had settled softly over Bremen. The air was cool, brushed with the scent of rain and bloom. In Elias's house, the lights of the dining room were low, and the soft glow of candles flickered across the wooden table. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken breast with golden potatoes and rosemary, a small salad, and a bottle of chilled Riesling. It caught the candlelight like liquid gold. Viola smiled as she set down 2 plates, while Elias lit the last candle and turned off the overhead lamp. The northern evening light lingered softly and rose-tinted, spilling gently through the window. The room instantly felt smaller, warmer, like a private universe. This is almost too perfect, she said with a laugh. Did you always cook like this? Elias shrugged, pouring the wine. Years of surviving alone taught me that good food can fix almost anything. And tonight, he paused, meeting her eyes. Tonight deserves a little more than takeout. They ate slowly, their conversation weaving easily between memory and the present. They talked about the years that had passed, her life in Switzerland, his Mars research, the odd bittersweet ways they had grown up while missing each other, and the magical days he had spent preparing for his way home. When the plates were cleared, Elias opened the small bar cabinet by the window. Now, he said with a grin, something special. You make the Swiss one, I'll make the American. Viola laughed. Still competitive? Always, he said. She took gin, limes, mint, and elderflower syrup, a refreshing alpine mix she'd learned in St. Gallen. While Elias reached for bourbon, honey, and a splash of orange bitters. They worked side by side, teasing, tasting, trading glances that lingered more with every shared moment. When they finally sat down with their 2 cocktails, the candles had burned low. Viola's cocktail was crisp and bright, his was deep and warm, like amber. They changed their glasses and clinked. "To the long way home," he said. "And to finding it," she replied. They sipped their cocktails, enveloped by a tender, inviting atmosphere. Laughter and joy lingered, drifting gently around them. "How about a slow dance?" Elias asked softly, extending his hand and bowing slightly in invitation. "Sure." Viola smiled. He played a soft tune from his phone. It was Liszt's Dream of Love, the melody humming between them. It was their first slow dance again in 8 years. "It is really like a dream," Viola murmured. "And it comes true," Elias whispered, closing to her ear. The distance that had once defined them dissolved, replaced by the certainty of belonging. "You know," Elias said, voice soft but steady, "I was once afraid that Javier's fire would leave you hopelessly addicted." Viola busted out a smile. And I won't have a chance to show you mine any longer. Your fervent love, hidden behind that cold heart," Viola teased, smiling. "That heart's never been cold for you," Elias laughed, drawing her closer. "How?" Viola teased. "I'll show you." Elias stopped the slow dance. He pulled her into a kiss that was sudden, absolute, and incandescent, a release of all the years of silence and uncertainty. It was the kiss of two separate orbits finally colliding, of two souls who had fought through a universe of distance to meet at last. The scent of sweet bourbon and crisp elderflower from their cocktails mingled on their tongues, a perfect, intoxicating blend of his warmth and her brightness. Their bodies pressed flush, and the meticulous control she had always known in him dissolved, replaced by a raw, overwhelming physical need. His passion was a warm, consuming current, and she responded instantly, desperately, tangling her fingers in the short, soft hair at the nape of his neck. The physical fervor in his touch was an open declaration, louder than any scientific speech he could give. The soft melody on his phone cut off abruptly as the battery died, a sudden silent cue. And at the same moment, they heard a faint metallic clink from the windowsill. The last pool of wax in the candle holder finally guttered and went dark. The room was plunged into a beautiful absolute shadow. Elias broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, his chest heaving with ragged, hot breaths. "No more distance, my love. No more waiting. I am yours. All of me, all the time, always." Viola didn't speak. She simply tightened her grip on his hand, her thumb stroking the back of his knuckles. She followed him past the cooling cocktails, past the extinguished candle, toward the half-open door of the bedroom. In Elias's presence, the walls of fear Viola had built against scorching love finally crumbled. She shed the last remnants of her terror, fully surrendering to the profound joy of their entwined destinies. In Elias's arms, she no longer feared the heat of love, no longer hid behind protective walls. She gave herself over completely, basking in the ecstatic union of their souls, those moments of pure perfection and unshakable bliss. It was like diving into a river of molten sunlight, every current thrilling her senses, every ripple carrying her higher, until she and he were not separate, but one luminous, overflowing tide. The next morning arrived with soft light spilling through the curtains. The dawn rain had stopped, leaving the streets fresh and gleaming. Viola woke first, wrapped in quiet warmth, the faint scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She lay still for a moment, letting the peace sink in, the familiar sound of Bremen outside the window, the steady rhythm of life beginning again. Then she sat up, walking in the living room, smiling as she saw Elias by the counter, barefoot, wearing one of his old university shirts and carefully buttering toast. He turned when he heard her. "Good morning, sleeping beauty." "Good morning, my early prince," she said, her voice still soft from sleep. He handed her a mug of coffee, kissed her softly, then leaned against the table, studying her with a smile that held both tenderness and awe. "It feels different today," he said. She replied. "It feels like home," they said together, smiling. Outside, a tram bell chimed faintly. Sunlight fell across the table where 2 half-finished cocktails from last night still glimmered like tiny promises. The world beyond the window was waking, steady, ordinary, and quietly beautiful. And for the first time in a long while, so were they.